go ahead and get started. So my name is Virginia. I'm one of the many librarians at Allen Hancock, and I actually am based out of San Diego, so I work remotely. I like to emphasize that only because I've never been on campus, and I know that some students haven't either. And so just so everybody is aware that we are on campus and online. So if at any point you need help, the hours for chat are listed here. So we have more extensive hours during our chat reference, but on site, we do have pretty extensive hours both at Lompoc and Santa Maria. So if you're a student and you're on campus and you ever need help, please make sure to stop by the library. But then also if you're working from home, whether you're an online student only or are just stopping by to do something else on campus and don't have time to visit the library, you can always connect with us through chat. Also via email and phone. So we're here to help you. Any question is a good question, so always make sure to connect with us. And then as we go along, if you have any questions, let me know. So the focus of the workshop is going to be on research for social sciences. So that could be a vast array of classes and research prompts and subjects. So we'll try to use examples that in your case would apply to your specific assignment. But generally speaking, these tips and tricks are going to help you for any discipline. We're just going to give examples of databases that are a little bit more tailored to those social sciences, in addition to general databases that are really good to know because they're multidisciplinary. And so if you're accustomed to using them, then you're kind of a step ahead of the game when it comes to researching for any other class. So when you've been assigned a research project, know that the library has many, many resources, including librarians and staff who, librarians specifically, will be able to help you break down the research process as well as your research assignment, which would include narrowing your actual topic. Sometimes we start very broad, and as we research along, we discover that there are certain areas that we want to dig a little bit deeper. And so that ends up being our actual focus within that big umbrella of a topic. The other thing is navigating and locating appropriate resources. And appropriate can mean either because of the subject or because of your instructor's request. So perhaps you've been assigned an assignment that requires you to use newspapers or articles that are from the last 10 years. And so we can kind of help you navigate databases and resources that apply to those requirements. And then we'll also be helping you with creating citations. There are lots of great tools with databases. So I don't know, have you used many of the databases from the library before?
I don't think I have, to be honest.
Okay, and that's fine. So some of this might be more of a review and other things might be totally new to you. So that's kind of what we're hoping for, that you learned something new today.
Sounds good.
And again, if you are kind of stuck or if you're curious or just need help, you can always reach out to us via chat, email, in person. So multiple ways of reaching out.
Perfect.
So databases are basically like mini libraries, right? And they're accessible online. So they store information in a way that's organized and you can easily and quickly retrieve them. So you're not limited by building hours. You can just go to our website and access these resources with your student ID and password. The library databases are subscription based. So that's why we need your student ID for access. And the library pays these fees so that you have the best resources available. They're reliable sources, so it's different from just going online and looking for information in Google, because there's already been a filter of going through resources and making sure that they're credible, good, reliable sources. And then some of those databases are curated for specific subjects. So you might, if you're in a nursing program, maybe you'll use more of the science-based databases. If you're a sociology major, more of the social sciences, and some will overlap. And then they kind of open the door to many different types of resources. So Some databases will be only for streaming videos, academic videos, or even more popular documentary kinds. Others might be more focused on ebooks, and others might have kind of a mix of things, which it would include like encyclopedia/background articles, or academic scholarly journals, newspaper articles, ebooks. So there's a little bit of each. And that's why we end up with 100 databases. So there's a lot to explore. You might end up getting to know a few very, very well, and the others, you know, maybe at some point you'll discover them, but not a consistent use. So any questions so far?
No, I really like the idea of using the database there, just because one of my biggest hangups was I'm going to be writing a paper in criminal justice that has to do with like earning back the citizens' trust for the correctional system. And I was kind of starting to think, well, you never know when they're blogs or when they're advertised, paid, you know what I'm saying? So it's good to go through yours because it's already reliable.
Yeah, and for something like that, you might use a mix of government websites, for example, which you would have to access through Google, but there are ways of doing that without kind of being exposed to all the other stuff, all the blogs and all of that. So I'll briefly show you how to do that, especially for statistics. I feel like government websites are really helpful. And so when you're talking about earning the community's trust, perhaps you have reports from specific law enforcement agencies that would be really helpful. And so then you could also access the database for those academic journals that kind of break down the data and apply it to other social issues. So you kind of work together with those. So that's actually a really great example that you brought up. Yeah. So things to consider before you start your research project. First of all, sometimes assignments are very, very broad. And so you kind of want to sit with it for a little bit and decide what it is that you want to research. And that doesn't mean that you're going to get stuck in one subject or topic, because you want to be a little bit flexible depending on the information that you're finding. You also want to do a little bit of background information or research, either through encyclopedias or reading a few newspaper articles. Oops. So what that does is give you a kind of a better grasp on your topic, so that when you dive deeper into these really dense technical academic research articles, you're going to have a much better understanding of the topic. And so the more advanced literature isn't going to be super intimidating. It's going to be something that makes sense altogether with the information you've found so far. Another thing to consider is whether your topic is narrow enough. So for example, with your topic, credibility, trust in the community, perhaps there's a specific community you'd like to address. Perhaps there's a specific historical period you want to address. So there are different ways that you might want to narrow down. And again, that sometimes happens a little bit earlier in the research process and sometimes a little bit further down the road once you've had enough information gathered. So some people have had a class and they've discussed a topic really in depth, and so they already know that that's what they're interested in, and they have enough of that information to kind of move forward with it. So it kind of depends on where you're at. So once you kind of have all of these ideas, before you even start your research, really, you're going to just write some key terms so that when you're accessing the databases, you have those key the key vocabulary to really communicate with the database. So for example, if you're talking about community, trust, justice system, all of these are key terms. And so what's really nice to do in advance is just grab a piece of paper and write down several terms that are related. And that way you have kind of like your treasure chest of vocabulary that you can just reach into whenever you get stuck. The database speaks the same language as us, but it might communicate a little bit differently and use different vocabulary. So we need to modify our vocabulary so that we can get the best results. And so having that list of terms really helps it be a more smooth transition as you're researching. So I don't know, maybe we can take a few minutes right now and you can write down some terms that come to mind for your topic.
Sounds good.
So, and if you wouldn't mind, would you say them out loud, and that way we can kind of
Oh, sure.
back and forth?
So far, the main three that I really liked were yours, which was community, trust, and justice system.
Okay.
And
So,
then, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
And then I was kind of thinking, if I was to try to narrow it down, it may be something along the lines of maybe possibly like African Americans or something along those lines,
Okay.
just because of like Rodney King from forever ago. And then now with the Floyd Mayweather and all of these things that, you know, someone catches on their phone. Well, not Rodney King, but, you know, it's just things that have gotten out of control that have not helped with that problem.
Right. And so again, you could take that historical perspective and include that as part of your paper, or you can rely on something a little bit more contemporary. So if there are particular people that have been involved, you can definitely include those terms. So that could be part of your vocabulary list. And then the other thing is, as you go along in your research, you're going to find other terms that'll help you kind of narrow down a little bit. So that list is going to stay with you throughout the research process. But sometimes we have more vocabulary to describe it, and sometimes we have less because we're just starting out. So either way, we'll just start jotting down a few terms. And then the other thing to keep in mind is the kinds of resources that you can use. So if your instructor said, I only want you to use peer-reviewed sources, then there's a way to filter that and only get those resources from the database. So looking at your assignment, those are things that you want to keep in mind. And also page length. So if your instructor said 10 pages, you're going to need lots of sources for that. Sometimes they tell you and sometimes they don't. And so we can kind of work with you to determine what would be the best. But in that case, you might also want to check in with your instructor and just double check, like, how many sources are you expecting us to work with? Yeah. Okay. So any questions about considerations for research?
Not so far. I'm like, this is already starting to help me get started as far as where to go and where not to go. So I appreciate that.
Okay, well, thank you. And I think if I didn't mention it already, some of the things that students might do is start out with a very specific idea and start writing their paper first, and then try to get their research into and plug it into a paper that's pretty much written. And that's really hard to do. It's really hard to write your paper and then find specific sources to support exactly what you just said. So the writing process happens a little bit later. You can work with an outline, and that outline will take shape as you discover sources to support your claims. But in the event that you were headed in that direction, I would recommend not doing it because it can get really frustrating. So kind of keeping an open mind about what resources are out there for your particular topic. It'll make it a lot easier. So just a little tip. Okay, so we'll head over to the library database now. And so like I mentioned, the library has lots of different resources. We're going to focus on a few databases today. I do want to point out from the main page, you have a few things that will really help you. So one is that chat. So it says available. Somebody is online right now if you had any questions. This one search is kind of like our Google a little bit, because once you type in your terms, it's going to pull articles and resources from many different databases all at once. So it's kind of nice because it's kind of like a one-stop shop. But there are also specific databases that you can access directly. So under the research section here, if you go to articles and resources, we'll click right there. And so we do have starting your research. So I mentioned perhaps going to an encyclopedia or background source database to get background information on your topic. So in your case, perhaps it's for definitions or for historical context. They're going to be very broad, kind of like what you would find in Wikipedia. So, but credible and with those really helpful tools. So that is for background information. And then there are other things here that might help. So general database articles include those multidisciplinary databases like Academic Search Complete. So you might use that for a variety of classes that you might be taking. JSTOR is really nice for academic journals. So it primarily works with that kind of scholarly journal resources. There are others that are really good for opposing viewpoints. So if you have to present pro-con on a particular topic, that's a really nice database to access, again, for multiple subjects. And then CQ Researcher has really lengthy reports on topics. So I'm going to show you Academic Search Complete and CQ Researcher, just so you get a feel for what they're like, because they're pretty different, and the way that information is presented, it displays differently. So Academic Search Complete is one where you can work with a lot of filters. So, and let me know if you have any questions along the way.
You said that was Academic Complete, right?
Academic Search Complete, yeah. Okay. So it looks pretty, I don't know, it's minimalistic. There aren't a lot of like features or anything that jump out at you, but there are a lot of ways of searching. I like to start out with a basic search and just typing in a few key terms. Again, it won't be a sentence or a question, it's just those main terms. So you had mentioned community, trust, and then what was the other term that we used?
Justice system.
Thank you.
Would you put like commas, or would you put anything in between them?
So you could do the word, now they're evolving to where you don't have to really work too much with, they're called Boolean operators. So you could do and justice system, we could put quotation marks around it. And so what that's going to do is do a phrase search. So as opposed to searching for justice and separately system, it'll kind of glue them together.
Okay.
So you can add those in between, or you could use the advanced search to kind of modify the way that they, or community, or I don't know, neighborhood, for example. But in the basic search, you can just type it that way, or just play around and see, because sometimes it will tweak a little bit your results, but it's pretty efficient at finding terms. The one that I use the most, as opposed to and or those in between terms, I use the quotation marks a lot for phrase searching, so that it glues those terms together that I'm looking for. So good question. So I'll hit search and then see what it pulls up. So the way that I searched, it brought up 124. And this is just for us to compare and see just one. So yeah, so it will modify. So, okay, let's take a look. Here we have 124 results, which actually isn't too many because we haven't filtered anything. So did you say you needed a particular type of resource?
No, I just wanted to make sure that it was reliable, just because sometimes, it's easy to get a little slipped up a little bit.
Yeah, and some websites are really good at convincing you that it's the best information out there. So yeah. Okay, so let me show you how the filters work. So you want to limit to full text. If you wanted those scholarly resources only, you could click on peer reviewed. And we're down to 42 now. And then the other thing you might want to look at are perhaps articles from the last, I don't know, 15 years.
Okay. This is really cool.
It is really cool. The thing with databases is, for the most part, you navigate them pretty similarly. So once you get one down pretty well, you'll notice that there are certain features that kind of translate from one to the other. EBSCO, I think, even though it has a lot of features, it's still really user friendly. So I kind of gravitate towards, and I call it EBSCO, but they have, you'll see that it says EBSCO host, but under our databases, it's listed as Academic Search Complete. So I'm sorry if I'm using those interchangeably.
Okay.
So once we've added those, it's updating to 35. So that's a manageable amount.
Mhm.
So what we want to do next is kind of browse through titles and see what is it that kind of stands out to us. So if you look at a title, or you might get ideas for other terms that might be helpful, then if you look at the subject, that would be really helpful for you to pull terms from. So communities, justice administration, justice system. So there are other terms that we could take: criminal law. So communities and the enforcement of lower level offenses. So maybe that's something that sticks out to you. And you click on the title. And so it's going to take you to a landing page where you have information about the author, a little summary of it, those subject terms that are related. And then to actually view the full article, it's going to be this PDF full text. So that'll open up all 7 pages. And so again, it starts with a little introduction, and then you can kind of browse through and read whatever is applicable to what you're looking for. So one of the things that's really nice about using the databases, we'll go back to that article, are the tools, because again, it saves you time. So in EBSCO, if I click on the email tool, I can also select to get the citation included. So for your class, are you using APA?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would select from the drop-down menu, APA, and then type in my email address and then send it.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. What I always tell people is you don't have to be 100% sure that this is the article that you want, but it'll be a lot easier to delete something from your inbox than backtrack and try to find that one article that you didn't think you would need, but then you ended up needing. So if you're like even 50% sure that you might use it, then just send it to yourself. It's easier to delete stuff later. And emailing is a great way. You don't lose track of it. If you ever want to just have the link to something but not email it to yourself, always use the permalink. Okay. Don't copy from up here from the address bar, because it won't redirect you to the same article. It'll probably give you an error message. But if you copy the permalink, you're set. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. So any questions about this? It's
I feel like this is like the way to go. Oh, this is so awesome. It's really exciting.
That's awesome. Well, I'm happy that you think this will be useful. So that's kind of EBSCO, or Academic Search Complete, in a nutshell. So I want to show you what CQ Researcher has, because that has really comprehensive reports. And as you're first starting with something, it's really nice to have like that broad understanding of a topic. So here you can search a topic, and perhaps Black Lives Matter would be something that would be interesting to you for this particular assignment. Mm-hmm. Or so you could type in your term, or you could browse general topics listed here. So perhaps law and justice, and you can scroll through civil rights African Americans, crime and law enforcement, criminal law procedure and due process. So maybe we can look at one of these. And so it'll tell you the date that this was published. And then also, if it's a short report, it's going to be a little bit more condensed. So let's see. Perhaps you want to look under one of these: systemic racism, but police under scrutiny, maybe. So can law enforcement restore public trust? That
Oh
seems
my gosh.
right on your topic. So what I love about CQ Researcher is that not only do you have this introduction and that overview, but you have this really great layout. So you can skip through sections. So it has the introduction, overview, background. So it gives you that historical context. It also gives you information about the current situation. And this is from 2020, so it's pretty recent. It also has pro-con stances, chronology, which might be helpful, kind of give you that historical overview of kind of why are we where we're at today. Mm-hmm. So these are some really good resources as you're first starting out, and then you can compile with the different sources that you found perhaps in EBSCO or Academic Search Complete. So would you like me to email this one to you?
Yeah, that would be great if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah. And then.
Thank you. Yeah, I put it in. Did you get my email?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you. That is so cool. I really was like wondering how to start all of this. And I would much rather stay here within this system than surf and, you know.
It gives you kind of like a safe environment to explore. And that doesn't mean that you're not doing the work, right? But it is saving you a lot of time from like filtering through the junk. So you're still going to figure out whether or not these resources are appropriate. The thing is that you know that all of these are credible. So that is what's super helpful. Again, you have that cite button, which it's not included in the email, but if you ever need it, you can always come back to the article itself and then select the citation format that you need. So again, these tools are really, really helpful.
Definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome. And see, if I had just typed in my topic, it might have been a little bit harder to find this particular report. So for CQ Researcher, I like to start by browsing topics and browsing reports rather than searching for a key term. But that's my preference. It's just that I feel like I end up finding what I actually need by browsing in this sense. Versus other databases.
And that was really quick and easy by just glancing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's because you already have a good understanding of your topic, but also it kind of allows you to explore other aspects of it that perhaps you hadn't thought to explore. So that's kind of nice about browsing. You can keep an open mind, but also find what you were looking for. Okay. So that's CQ Researcher. Any questions about this one?
No, and this one seems pretty straightforward as well, which is good.
Yeah, and again, different way of navigating, but the idea is pretty similar. Your tools, you're locating that information, and as you get more used to one database over another, you'll kind of know where to go, and you can always connect with us if you need help with that.
Perfect.
So those are two really helpful general databases for social issues and social sciences, and there are more here. For lack of time, we'll skip over, but always feel free to connect with us. And here's the little chat button if you ever wanted to. So
that's good.
Okay, so we already went over kind of what you would find in those reference books and databases. And then these are listed under general article databases. So EBSCO or Academic Search Complete, as well as CQ Researcher. Perhaps you would need newspapers. So I'm just going to show you kind of the newspapers that we have. So lots to explore, especially this one. It includes the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, lots of subscriptions there. So that's kind of helpful to know about. And then we get down to the second section, which is actually by subject. So these are databases that are going to be focused on those particular subjects or disciplines. So in this case, social sciences. If we drop down, CQ researcher is mentioned here, so we already went over that. And then some of them are a little bit more tailored to, like, this one is very specific, right? European views of the Americas, America, history and life. So maybe this is something that you would want to explore, but here's one that I'm going to show you because it's like articles. It's under that EBSCO umbrella, so it navigates the exact same way. But it's only going to pull those articles that are specifically related to psychology. So let's see, what were the terms that?
I'm wondering about like maybe trust in the justice system.
Okay.
Or community trust, possibly.
Okay. Okay, so one thing to point out, so of the 309 results, in this case, it didn't yield any results with the terms that we had chosen, but it uses a system where it kind of scans through articles to pull up things that are related. So again, same setup as the other one. So you can select full text, and then narrow down by year. And we can look at.
Oh, that thin blue waveform looked good too.
Where? Oh, here, this one.
I think so. Yeah, that's the one. That's
okay.
Cool.
So if we click on the title, and again, the titles tend to give us a lot of information already. It kind of piques your interest, right? So then it gives you all of the article information, again, some keywords, so policing, race, lots of terms that you might want to include, that abstract, so you can kind of determine whether or not it is related to what you're looking for. And then the PDF full text would be right here. And then the email tool. Would you like me to send it to you?
Sure. Thank you. I'm like, thank you so much. Oh, this is so great.
Well, what's nice is that, again, when it's a smaller group, we can kind of tailor examples to what you're looking for. So that's helpful too. Yeah. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and that way you can kind of navigate. You can share your screen with me. So I'll stop the recording, and then we can kind of, I'll let you take command of the screen and show me what you would want to do when you're searching, and then we can go from there. Okay. So